Welcome to Vaulted Era, the hidden stories behind money, power, and history. In 1600, a group of English merchants signed a document that would reshape the entire world forever. They called it the East India Company, a private trading firm built on paper, ambition, and borrowed money. Queen Elizabeth I signed the Royal Charter on December 31st, 1600, a date that changed the arc of history. 125 merchants pooled together £72,000, an enormous fortune in that era. The system they created was revolutionary. Shared risk, shared profit, the world's first major joint stock corporation. This was not just trade, this was a new financial architecture, a blueprint for corporate power that still exists today. Meet our consistent narrator character, Thomas Hale, a fictional EIC clerk who witnessed the company's rise from within. Thomas Hale wrote in his journal, "We were merchants who became governors. That is the strangest truth I know." The spice trade was the engine. Pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon. In 1600, these were worth more than gold per pound. A single voyage to the east could return 500% profit. The money was simply irresistible. But the voyages were dangerous. Pirates, storms, disease. The risk was matched only by the potential reward. The genius of the East India Company was this: if your ship sank, you only lost your share, not your entire fortune. Risk engineered. By 1608, the East India Company had reached the shores of India. They arrived as traders, they would leave as rulers. Thomas Hale stood at the ship's bow as Surat appeared on the horizon. "This," he wrote, "is where everything changed." The Mughal Empire was the richest civilization on Earth. Its GDP in 1600 was 25% of global output. The East India Company asked Emperor Jahangir for trading rights. He granted them, a decision historians still debate today. Step by step, the company built trading posts called factories. Each one was a node in a growing money network. They standardized prices, created ledgers, established credit systems, the financial infrastructure of an empire in miniature. By 1668, the Crown gave Bombay to the EIC for just £10 a year in rent. Power was being transferred quietly. Thomas Hale recorded every transaction. He saw it clearly. We are not buying goods, we are buying loyalty, land, and law. Money flowed. The company paid shareholders consistent dividends, making it the most attractive investment in Europe. The East India Company stock price was publicly listed. Ordinary wealthy citizens could own a piece of this imperial machine. This was the birth of private profit capitalism, where private profit and national power became dangerously intertwined. The system fed itself. Trade generated profit, profit funded armies, armies protected trade, a self-sustaining loop of power. By 1700, the East India Company controlled more trade revenue than the entire British government, a company outgrowing its own country. But with great revenue came a dangerous question: who actually controls this company? Shareholders, directors, or the Crown? Here is a fact that still shocks people. The East India Company had its own private army, 250,000 soldiers. That army was larger than the British military itself. A corporation fielded more soldiers than its own government. Thomas Hale was unsettled. He wrote, "We are merchants with muskets. I am not sure if that is brilliant or terrifying." The East India Company hired Indian soldiers called sepoys, local men trained in Western discipline, fighting for a foreign corporation's profit. With military force, the East India Company could now enforce contracts, protect routes, and eliminate competition permanently. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 was the turning point. The East India Company defeated the Nawab of Bengal with bribery and brilliance. After Plassey, Robert Clive became the de facto ruler of Bengal, the richest province in Asia. One man, one company. Bengal had 30 million people and an economy larger than France. It now answered to a British trading company. The money that flowed out of Bengal to London was staggering. Historians call it the Great Drain of Wealth. Thomas Hale's journals grew darker here. The ledgers show profit, the streets show something else entirely, something worse. Between 1770 and 1773, a famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. The company continued extracting taxes throughout. This is the complexity of history. The East India Company was a financial marvel and a humanitarian catastrophe at the same time. To understand the East India Company's power, you need to understand its financial structure. It was centuries ahead of its time. The East India Company issued bonds, borrowed from banks, paid dividends, and lobbied Parliament, functioning like a modern global corporation. When profits fell, they went to Parliament for a bailout. In 1773, the British government gave them £1.4 million. Sound familiar? A massive corporation too big to fail, rescued by the state. This story is older than you think. The Regulating Act of 1773 was Parliament's attempt to control the East India Company. It was the world's first corporate oversight law. Thomas Hale attended a parliamentary session. He wrote, "They argue about controlling the company. The company funds their campaigns." The East India Company spent heavily on political lobbying. Dozens of MPs owned East India Company stock. The line between government and corporation blurred. This was regulatory capture, when the regulated industry controls its own regulators. The East India Company wrote the textbook on it. The company controlled trade in tea, silk, saltpeter, opium, entire commodity markets under one private entity's monopoly. Their monopoly on tea caused the Boston Tea Party of 1773, leading directly to the American Revolution. Yes, really. A corporate trade monopoly sparked the birth of the United States. The East India Company's fingerprints are on American history itself. Thomas Hale couldn't have imagined it. A company born to sell spices was reshaping the political map of the world. By the early 1800s, the East India Company needed a new product to balance its massive trade deficit with China. They chose opium. Opium grew in Bengal under East India control. It was shipped to China, creating mass addiction and enormous profit. When China banned opium imports, the East India Company lobbied Britain to go to war. The Opium Wars began, fought for corporate profit. The Opium Wars gave Britain Hong Kong. Corporate interests had literally reshaped the map of Asia permanently. Thomas Hale's son, Edward Hale, now worked for the East India Company. He wrote, "Father traded in spices, I trade in something darker." The East India Company's annual revenue by 1800 exceeded the GDP of most European nations. It was the largest company in history. Back in London, East India Company House on Leadenhall Street was the nerve centre, thousands of clerks managing a global empire. The system they built had its own courts, its own laws, its own currency, its own foreign policy, a state within a state. Profit was the metric. Everything else, governance, justice, welfare, was secondary to the quarterly dividend statement. This is the lesson of the East India Company's financial genius. When money is the only measure, all other measures are eventually abandoned. The beginning of the end came in 1857. Indian soldiers, sepoys, rebelled. It was called the Indian Uprising of 1857. The uprising shook the East India Company to its foundations. The British public was horrified. Parliament finally acted decisively. The Government of India Act of 1858 dissolved the East India Company. The Crown took direct control of India itself. Edward Hale wrote his final entry, "The company is dead, but everything it built, the railways, the laws, the borders, remains." The East India Company existed for 274 years. It reshaped 3 continents, sparked 2 wars, and pioneered modern corporate structure. After dissolution, shareholders received full compensation. The people of India did not. That asymmetry tells its own story. The East India Company's legacy is everywhere. Limited liability law, corporate lobbying, shareholder rights, all trace back to this company. Modern economists estimate the East India Company extracted $17 trillion in today's value from the Indian subcontinent. But the East India Company also built India's railways, legal frameworks, and postal systems. Complexity resists simple judgment. Thomas Hale's original journal was discovered in 2003 in a London archive. It contained 47 volumes, all still perfectly preserved. The journal's last line, written by Thomas in 1712, reads, "We built a system. The system outlived us all. Systems always do." That is the hidden story of money, power, and history that Vaulted Era exists to tell. The stories that shape our world. Today, 5 corporations control more GDP than 150 nation-states. The East India Company's DMA is in our world. Every multinational corporation that has ever lobbied a government owes its playbook to the East India Company. Every time a company grows too big and government steps in, we are rerunning the 1773 Regulating Act all over again. Edward Hale's question haunts us still. At what point does a company become too powerful for any government to contain? The East India answer, never. It took a mass uprising of 300,000 people to finally break the corporation's grip on power. History proves financial systems are neutral. They amplify whatever intentions build them wisely. The East India Company was the world's most powerful company. It was built by humans, served human ambition, and fell to human conscience.
If you made it to the end of the story, you already think different about money, power, and how system work. That is exactly who Vaulted Era is made for. Subscribe if you want more hidden stories. Drop a comment with the fact that shocked you most. My next vault is on the secret banking network that funded every major European war and changed history forever. Don't miss it.